Acapulco, Mexico. This is Anarchast.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. I'm still in Montana, still in Big Sky country with a guy I used to always call Matt Damon whenever I saw him at conferences, and he never got mad at me, which is really nice because I used to say it a lot when I was drinking too much. It's David Rodriguez, and great guy, and really into stuff that I'm really into, which is education, or edumacation as Homer Simpson calls it, or indoctrination when the government does it. And you actually were running a conference. You might not be doing it this year, but you may. We'll see what happens, called Education Options in San Jose. And you talked a lot about homeschooling, unschooling. I believe you had Dana Martin there, past Anarchast, numerous Anarchast guests. You also just came out with this book, The Underground History of American Education, an intimate investigation into the prison of modern schooling, which it absolutely is, with Taylor Gatto, who's one of the great people in this area of education. We'll talk about who he was or is. He's still alive, but he's not doing well with his health. But talk a lot about him because he's very interesting. I see you have the foreword by Ron Paul, which is pretty cool. Even afterward by Richard Grove, who's actually here where we're at the Red Pill Expo with the architects and engineers, right? Is that Richard?
No, Tragedy
Richard
and Hope.
Grove. Sorry,
yeah, Tragedy and Hope.
Yeah, that's Tragedy and Hope. Richard Grove. Oh yeah, I haven't heard from him in a while.
Yeah.
I'll ask you how he's doing a little later too. Yeah. But anyway, this looks really good. It's on Amazon. We'll have the links to that down below. I'll let you keep that. You can hold it up later whenever you want. But before we get into all this stuff, I got to ask you the tough questions. Yeah. How did you become an anarchist?
Well, I'm one of those funny guys who doesn't like to put label on myself as I go through the personal growth process. What I do know is I'm a human being who loves freedom, and I believe in the voluntary relationships, anarchist mindset, and just because there's so many ideas that come across. So, but I came across the voluntary relationship idea. I think once I saw that the political system was completely rigged with Ron Paul in 2012, seeing how the media treated him, I was just introduced to him like 2008, and then I was excited for 2012, and Ron Paul, championed the Constitution, limited government, he's our man, and I saw how he won all these polls, and then the media totally bypassed him, and I said, look at this guy, man, he's got a doctor, delivered 4,000 babies, he actually kept his oath to the Constitution, and they don't want any part of that. So
he was filling football stadiums with people.
Packed! He got like $12 million.
Had like 50 people at their rallies, and it's obviously the whole thing's rigged. Right?
Completely rigged. And then I think also at the same time I was listening to an audiobook by Murray Rothbard called For a New Liberty, and he started answering some of the questions that I had of how would the police operate, how would the fire department operate in a free society, in a stateless society. And after some time listening to that and talking to other people, I said, you know what? We're just humans. Larkin Rose was a big influence. You were a big influence to actually solidify that process. And so we're just being disenchanted by the political process and understanding who we are. I used to be like pretty religious, and so I was into the belief of the divine Son of God and stuff like that, which is totally great. People can believe in these things. Now I just realize that I'm a creation, and I'm way more like beautiful than the state. Like human beings are the gift, I feel, So I came across this idea that the voluntarist, philosophy is that we'll engage voluntarily if we want. If not, that's totally fine. Whereas the statist model is we'll coerce you and put a gun to your head effectively, but actually they will bring a gun to your head. And if not, they'll put fines on you, levy you, and throw you in jail for months and years. And so that was some of the steps in the process. And I said, yeah, we can engage, voluntarily. So I think I just always loved freedom as a kid, and then once these ideas started coming to the forefront, I said, yeah, this is the next step in the human evolution, it seems.
That's great. I know you've been coming down to Acapulco. How did you get into this whole education thing? Because I don't think you have any kids, do you?
I don't have 2 nephews and a niece, no kids of my own.
Okay, so it's really interesting that you're really pushing on the education front of things without even having your own kids. So how did you even get into this whole area?
Well, my original dream was just to earn a lot of money, live on the beach, have a nice life. And I found out what true success is leaving the world a better place, contributing to mankind. So imagine you have $5 million, $10 million in the bank. My mentor asked me, what would you do with your life? And I said, well, I'd like to, be on my deathbed and be like, I lived a good life, so what does that mean? And so I just started thinking about ways to empower people. And I have a business degree, but it didn't help me much. Most of my business success and things that I've done and sold has been out there building relationships, reading books, attending conferences, finding mentors. And so I said, so how come nobody told me this? There's a book, Think and Grow Rich, written in 1935 by Napoleon Hill, and he goes through the whole individual philosophy of achievement. He interviewed like 500 people over 20 years. And I said, how come nobody told me this? So 12 years in school, 5 years in college, and nobody mentioned that book to me. And I said, how many other things aren't they telling me? So I decided that I want to empower young people because I was an inquisitive person, maybe like some of your viewers and yourself. So I wanted answers. I want the truth. What's going on? What are we doing here? And so I concluded that education is where I wanted to focus. And then once I learned about John Gatto, the great interview on YouTube, you can find it's the Ultimate History Lesson by Tragedy and Hope. 5 hours, I just watched John Gatto deliver his talk. And I said, you know what? He's got some answers. What is the solution? The great quote by Buckminster Fuller, you don't change reality by fighting against it. You have to create a model that makes the old model obsolete. And so that was one process. I started pursuing it. And then I found a guy in Santa Cruz who has a school. He's been running it for 23 years. And it's effectively, let's say the kid's having trouble in school, they would go to his school. He was a former teacher also for 30 years, and he would help them transition to community college at age 15, 16, something like that, early to get on with their life. He's been doing it for over 20 years. He's graduated over 1,500 students, and now he's in his late 70s as well. So I said, you know what? These are inspiring guys I respect. They're true humanitarians, true people who empower others. And so I said, how can I empower young people? And so that's the process. And it was like you mentioned, I did the Education Options Expo, which was an expo just to introduce parents to respectful models of learning, because in the school system, when you mandate attendance, which is what the whole school is based on, that's a very disrespectful thing. I would never mandate you or force anybody to be in a building for any amount of time, let alone for 12 years. So the more I kind of dwelled on that and realized that this is a very construed system, and this is what Gatto talks about, and we talk about in the book. He goes through and shows that this is a deliberate dumbing down of people. It's not something like, the teachers need more money, or no, they need a better curriculum. What they need is to have a freedom to choose if they want to be there or not. Just like this conference and all the people here, if we want to go, we just get up and go. We don't got to raise our hand to go to the bathroom or get permissions for somebody, So these converging realizations, that was what helped me realize I got to get into education and basically free these kids and help these families unite and build, good, harmonious connections with each other and love and have actual deep emotions in this experience.
Yeah, it's pretty funny, isn't it? So many people talk about the importance of education. You hear that all the time. First of all, the future of the children, you hear that all the time. And of course that is kind of true. But then they'll say, education is so important. And you even hear these memes on the internet of people like, why does this football player make $5 million a year and a public school teacher only make $40,000 a year? It's like, well, obviously people really want the football player. And actually, I think $40,000 is way overpaying for what I've seen from most of these public school teachers. Not to mention they're doing pretty evil stuff by keeping these kids in there against their will. The whole public school system is quite evil. And John Taylor Gatto, actually, give it a little bit of background on him, because he's so fascinating, because he was actually like the public school teacher of the year in New York for numerous years, but he was totally exposing the system for what it was. And then I think eventually they probably got rid of him or something. I don't know the whole story. Mm-hmm. But why don't you talk a little bit about that and what the originations of the education system were? Because my understanding is it was basically just training people to get ready to be soldiers or work in factories, from what I understand, sort of under the Prussian system. But what's your understanding of where it all came from?
So let me answer the Gatto question if I get off track, track with the origins.
Sure.
So Gatto is, he taught in New York City schools for over 30 years, for actually 30 years. He got the State Teacher of the Year twice in 90, 91, and also City Teacher of the Year. And the reason is that his students in his schools were winning all these contests, essay contests, all these performance contests in the city. And so, like, who is this teacher that all these awards are being achieved by these students? Well, they go and they kind of modeled him and monitored him, and they realized he was doing some pretty unorthodox things, because when he first became a teacher, he was just gonna be there for a year or two, make some money, and go back and be an advertising copywriter, which he was doing. And then he realized that inside of these kids, there's genius. And that's what he said. He said, genius is probably natural to all of us and is as common as dirt. And so he said, how far can I push these 8th graders, right? These are 12 and 13-year-old kids. And he stayed for all 30 years because he said, there is no limit to how far I can push these kids as long as you're kind of serious with them and don't treat them like an 8-year-old, treat them like an adult. Back in the days, if you're 12 years old on a farm, you're expected to contribute to the family, not be a leech like it is up to the age 18 or 25.
30, 40 now.
30 now, right? And so they're telling people that education is this piece of paper, and he's focused on performance, and that's what Gatto was about. So he would allow kids to leave the classroom. So one of the key metrics of the school system that everybody should know about is the school gets their money on average daily attendance. That's why there's truancy officers. If your kid's not in class, they say, oh, where's Johnny? The back of their mind is, we're losing money. So call the truancy officer, go get them, and that's what they do, because that's how the district gets their money. So it's a really incredible thing to have the roster related to the money, not performance, attendance. So what he would do is he had a class of, let's say, 28, 30 people, and he would ask them individually, smaller groups, like 3 or 4 of them, what do you want to do this year? You know, this is your life. And,
that's great.
You know, so one girl, point being was that he'd find out what they want to do, and then he would mark them present and allow them to leave, go in downtown New York, go to libraries. There's kids that wanted to become comic book artists. So he said, okay, I'll cover for you. You go down to the library, you go learn about the comic business. You go see how comics are really made. You know, where's the money at? How can you make a career in that? And so he would allow them to leave. And then he retired by doing an op-ed on the Wall Street Journal. It's a great article. It's called I Quit, I Think. You can look it up on the web. And the closing paragraph, he said, I have to resign because I'm tired of hurting kids. So he said, if you have a job for me where I don't have to hurt kids, let me know, because this fall, I'll be looking for work. So that's the essence of him. He's a really intelligent guy. There's a lot of videos and audios on YouTube. I recommend you check him out. And he has all these great stories to share about that. And so his whole thing is to help these kids learn they are valuable, and in the marketplace, all you gotta do is give value to other people. They don't care how old they are. And so one of the funny stories was a girl who her dream was to become Olympic swimmer. You know, it's 13 years old. And so, okay, what do you want to do? Well, I want to become an Olympic swimmer. All right, so what can we do related to swimming? He said, well, what if you went around New York City, you found all the pools, and you started to create a rating system, lighting, depth, parking, price, all these things, and you created a resource, a reference guide that would be useful to other people. She's like, yeah, let's do that. So she spent a few months doing that. She created this reference guide, and it became a really useful thing. There was a local magazine publisher that said, wow, you know, John, your student created this reference guide. We'd like to publish it in our magazine, and you know, can you do that? So okay, she went and asked the student, would you like to publish it? Yeah, we'd like to publish it. And the publisher said, well, because they're a minor, we can't use her name. We got to use our writer's name, and we'll pay $500 for it. And she's like, no, it's mine. If you want to publish it, you put my name on it. So she rejected it, and it was just a demonstration that when people create something of value, they're proud. They enjoy the process, something that they're interested in. And so there's so many other stories, but his whole philosophy was let kids learn to teach themselves, and that teaching is not a profession, it is a function. I said, my gosh. So many one-liners like that in his books and his speeches, really empowering people, especially with the web. But he was around before the internet was really booming. So his curiosity led him to research where the origins came from. As you mentioned, Prussian Germany is where it came from. I think it was 1819, they implemented the first compulsory attendance laws, and then there was some success for a few decades. Horace Mann went over there and he borrowed that model, brought it to Massachusetts, 1852, and then that was the first state, and then over the next 60, 70 years, every state in the country had these compulsory attendance laws. And so the reason that Prussian Germany did that is because they were a militaristic country. And so their great philosopher, Johann Fichte, 1806, he said, well, they had just lost the battle of Jena to Napoleon's army, and they got together, all the leaders get together, why did we lose, what's going on? And they said, we command our soldiers to march into the battle, right? There's bullets flying at them, and they don't obey. So this philosopher in, it's called the Addresses to the German Nation, you can find that also. He said, we have to school them and destroy their imagination so that they cannot even conceive of another idea to do something differently.
Oh, wow.
And that's his words. So that's what Horseman did. He copied that because the United States started growing in power as well, and there's social engineers who brought it about. They wanted to bring it about. So, but even beyond that, the history of mankind, rulers and kingdoms and serfdoms like this, rulers have always known that if the people rise up, if the people unite amongst themselves, they can overthrow me, the king, or the prince or queen, whoever it is. So the Chinese had a philosophy of dumbing people down as well. How do you keep people stupid? In India, they also have the class system as well to keep the classes down. And so that's what's so great about America, is that for the first time, when all these people came over here, 1600s, 1700s, it was for religious freedom. And it was just land, just like this. There was no bosses. There was nobody telling what to do. It was anarchy. It was anarchy. It was total voluntarism. And say, well, man, we should have a store or a fire department or something. Okay, well, you gonna build it? Let's build it together, right? Or a church or whatever you want to do. There was no begging for government for handouts. The government do it and government do it. It was very independently minded because there was no choice. And so that's kind of the origins of where it came from, and it has a long history. There's also another reference. Machiavelli wrote The Prince, and this is about also social control and how to basically mind control people. This is in the 1400s. So there's a long history of rulers wanting to rule people and understanding that it's kids who we have to control, because if we can control them, guess what? That's the next voting class, that's the next the adults, and they just get indoctrinated and have blind belief and don't even think critically about anything they hear from the government.
Yeah, and it's going on today. You can just see that with so many people, and they don't even know how indoctrinated they've been, how dumbed down, unfortunately, and not talking down to anyone. We feel bad for them. We want to get them out of this sort of a thing. And they go home, they turn on the television programming, they're just getting propaganda. It's just, these people are just so, and as you pointed out, kids want to learn. And this is one thing that people forget. I guess maybe they don't have kids of their own or whatever. I have kids. They want to know everything. It's those school systems that knocks their interest in education out of them after 12 years of it. And I was one of them. When I went to public school, government school in Canada, and even in grade 6, I already told my mom, I said, this is a complete waste of my time. There's nothing I'm learning there that I couldn't learn on my own, or it's just a waste of my time. And I also pointed out, I said, all my teachers are idiots. They don't know anything. I even pointed out to them, and they just get mad at me. And now I have kids of my own, and actually I'm a big fan of unschooling, which is what Dana Martin talks about. But my wife is Mexican, and that's a big stretch for that sort of culture to go all that way to unschooling. But she's totally down for Montessori school, which they have in Acapulco, Mexico. Costs about $300 a month, by the way. And it's a glorious school. It actually looks a lot like this, but with palm trees. That's like what the schoolyard looks like. Yeah. And compare that to the prison that I was in Canada. And the kids absolutely love it. And it's very similar sort of a approach. They come in, they go, well, what do you kids want to learn today? And then they learn whatever they want to learn, and they love it. They come home, they're just full of energy and joy. I was never like that. I just wanted to get out of there. So what's your take on, I know you're working on some homeschooling things. Yeah. You might even be starting a business on that. And as well, talk a little bit about unschooling and what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, so I believe the future of education worldwide is homeschooling. Okay, so, and then unschooling is kind of a free-flowing version of homeschooling, but the essence is that you pull your kids out of school. Unschooling allows a little bit more freedom, complete self-direction generally, and sometimes there's homeschooling families that allow some freedom as well, but they want like a curriculum, so they'll buy a curriculum, teach that to their kids, or they have a structure. But the reason I think that's the future is because schools are failing miserably right now, and so that's why I started my expo, to introduce respectful models of learning to parents out there. You can go to Education Options TV on YouTube, see some of the speeches, and so I've been doing that for a couple years, just for my own research too. I want to see what's out there, right? There's a variety of options out there, and so that's what I did my research on. And now what I discovered is that parents see there's a problem, but homeschooling's way over here, you know? So there's this bridge that I feel is the missing link, the bottleneck in the operation. How can we get parents to gain courage and gain faith in their own ability to bring their kids along? And one of the challenges is because they were schooled, they have all their habits and trained with them. They call it learned helplessness. And let me just give a story on learned helplessness. This is where we limit ourselves. So if you believe you're a child of God or divine or consciousness, awareness, something phenomenal, which I believe you are and we are, then you have unlimited potential. So wouldn't we be able to create and produce and have a magnificent life of, you know, joy and productivity and happiness? Yes, we would. But we learn in school, learn helplessness. What's that? Learn helplessness is where we learn to self-limit. And the example is, if you ever gone to a circus and you saw these giant elephants being controlled by a small little man with a rope, why don't those elephants break free and just leave and go for freedom? They were taught as a small little calf, I don't know if you can see this or not, they were chained to a pole, and they were rambunctious and young and energetic. They're trying to pull. They couldn't break the chain, and so at some point they decided, I can't do it. I cannot break this chain. And so years later, the elephant becomes huge, and now when the elephant tries to pull that same rope, he feels the resistance, and now he's triggered back to when he was a young calf, and he says, I can't do it. But in reality, if he would just pull further, he would break it easily and he would be free. So we limit ourselves, and that's what happens to parents, in my view, because they were schooled and they learned your opinion doesn't matter, you got to get permission to do anything, and if the government doesn't prove it, then it's, you know, it's bad. Reality, governments, you know, are created and they fall. Where's the Roman Empire right now? It's gone. And just like the US and other states, they rise and they fall, but guess what? Human life is the real deal. So unschooling, I love unschooling because it allows self-directed learning, right? Also known as like an autodidact. If you teach yourself, that is the key. When young people learn to teach themselves, they no longer need the stick of the teacher saying, do what I say, because now they're doing it out of self-interest and their own motivation because they have a goal, they have a dream, they have a mission that they want to achieve in this lifetime. And that sometimes takes some time, but sometimes they just, hey, asking questions. Why? And I would encourage parents out there, if you have a 5-year-old or 7-year-old and they're just asking questions all the time, you don't have to know the answers. You can just say, I don't know. And we didn't learn that in school because if you didn't know anything, you were a failure and you would get mocked or embarrassed. But in the success world, it's okay to not know, right? As I learn more, maybe you can agree, I realize I don't know much, right? As I learn more, it's like, oh my gosh, there's so much more to learn. And so that's why I'm starting my online community called homeschoolleader.com, hoping to launch in the fall 2017 to help you parents, grandparents, guardians, whoever it is. We all see there's something going on in schools. Gatto will show you where it came from. It's terrible. It's been designed. So what do we do? And I believe it's homeschooling. And so we're going to set it up. It's going to have training modules so you can learn the philosophies, some of the curricula, what to do, how to think about it. And as you do that, you'll become more liberated as an adult. And then you'll see your kid, they already have the genius inside of them. And if genius is too strong, use brilliant. Every person is brilliant. And so your job, and by the way, the root of education, that word is educo or edukar, which means to draw from within. Not to like download or force upon, but to unfold, right? Like a flower that unfolds, you don't know how beautiful it is until it unfolds during its own time. So that's why I get so passionate about it, because I was in school also, it was about 5th or 6th grade. I'm like, these teachers are stupid, they disrespect me, and that's where like you start to become rebellious and get in trouble and stuff like that. And you know, mom and dad are like, what are you doing at school? And you're like, they're idiots, you know, they don't care about me. And so I remember being, 11, 10, and if somebody would have let me know, hey, we can help you get an apprenticeship, we can help you go volunteer at the farm, or go volunteer, learn how to build a fence, or change the oil on a car, build an engine, I would have been, yeah, let's go, easily.
Yeah, when I was saying to my mom I wanted out of school in like grade 7, I said, I just want to be on my computer all day. I said, this is the future. And this was like way back. This is 1980. The Apple II Plus had just come out, and I actually got my grandfather, because we didn't have much money, to buy me a Apple II Plus clone, which I had to build myself, which we had shipped over from Vietnam because we couldn't afford a real Apple II Plus. I had to use a soldering iron to make it myself. I was like, this is the future. And if you look at my life today, everything's online. Everything I've ever done, my internet companies, everything. And I wanted to do that, but they were just holding me back. I actually ended up doing a deal with my mom and the school that I would just go for the tests, which, I don't think they even let you do that very often anymore. But back then, this is back in the 80s, I said, yeah, whatever. I just write everything down on my arm or whatever. I was like, this is useless. I'm never going to use this information. Most of it's wrong, social studies. And, I talk about education quite a bit. I think it's really important. And that's why I've had Dana Martin on Anarchast so many times, because I really like her thoughts and how she's thinking and how she's doing it. And I say about the education system, especially college, that's a whole other topic. I say about college, colleges today are basically where people who have spent their entire lives not thinking for themselves go for 4 more years of training. That's essentially, so you got these 12 years of nothing, they don't learn anything, they get out, they can't even do anything. That's what you hear all the time, right? You hear that from anyone. Oh, I just got out of high school, I can't get a job. Why? Because I don't know how to do anything. It's like, well, what did you do the last 12 years? What a waste of time. Well, go for 4 more years and now pay $100,000 for your Bachelor of Basket Weaving or whatever it is. And then they get out, they're like, I can't get a job. Why? Because I don't know how to do anything. You just wasted 16 years, now you have $100,000 in debt. The whole system is screwed. But it is interesting because I think what you're offering to do with this homeschooling thing is really needed, because I just spoke to an anarchist actually it was about a month ago. And it's this young anarchist girl in her 20s, and she has a kid who's like 8 or 9 or 10 or something like that. Maybe something like that. And she was saying to me, oh man, the public school system is so bad, my girl comes home crying every day. And I said, take her out of there. And she was like, what? And do what? Like, it was just like outside of the bounds of like, and she's an anarchist too. You'd think she'd be more open-minded or free thinking, but she had never thought about it. And I introduced her to Dana Martin, and Dana just got on, and within a few minutes of Facebook chat, she had decided to take her kid out of public school. And I just saw on Facebook just a couple days ago, it was her daughter's last day of school. Her daughter was glowing with the biggest smile on her face. But a lot of people have questions. It's kind of scary. I've never done this. What do we do? A lot of people say, well, I don't have time. So how do you handle all that kind of stuff? So what are some of your answers to those people who have a lot of questions and concerns about homeschooling?
Well, number one is that while they're in the school system, they are being habit trained. Okay, so some of the mechanisms that you're familiar with, ringing bells, changing of classes every 40 minutes, right? So these are habits.
Jing.
How unnatural is that, right? Because as you know, as a successful business person yourself, concentration is what we need. How can we get into something? We don't need 30-minute, interludes. We want 3 hours and it goes by, oh my gosh, I didn't even know how that occurred. So that's why I start with is a philosophy of learning, the philosophy of life. How, like, this is a question that most people never think about. So if we start with the foundation of a philosophy, what is learning? What is achievement? What is success? These are important questions that if you have a kid, then you start thinking about these things. And because they're so like profound and philosophical, it seems like a big task. So I help them understand. The great success definition I heard from Coach John Wooden, he said, success is peace of mind, which is a direct result of self-satisfaction in knowing you made the effort to become the most of what you can become, right? You made the effort to become the best that you're capable. And that was something that he created over decades of teaching successful basketball players in college. So that's the first thing, is start with a foundation and then understand that learning is always happening. You and I are, no longer in our school days, but we're learning, right? We're at a conference, we're learning, we're traveling, we're talking to people, we're building relationships. This learning does not stop. What happens is schooling stops, and kids, whether they graduate high school or college, if they have a commencement ceremony and they're like, yeah, I'm finished. Well, commencement means to begin. So they're celebrating victory because that's what they've been told, and in fact, they should be beginning their life. So that's.
And they're also just so happy to get out of it because it's such a prison-like environment, and then they just go drink, and it really sucks the interest in learning out of you. That's one of the goals of the whole process, and it's just so wrong, the entire education system. And like we were talking about the homeschooling, people are just not really quite sure how to go about it and all that kind of stuff. Interesting side story, and I want to ask you a bit more about the homeschooling, but my son, when he was about 7, came up to me one day, and he said, Papa, I've got a business idea. I'm like, awesome. And he goes, I'm going to make photocopies for people. And I was kind of like, he's only 7, there's already Kinkos and all this kind of stuff. But then a few days or weeks later, I was at this government office and I had to do something, I forget what I had to do. And they're like, you need 10 photocopies of all these documents. I'm like, 10? And why? And don't you have a photocopy? They're like, no. I'm like, well, where's a place I can get photocopies? They're like, you just have to go find a place. And so right then I was like, my son probably saw that and realized, and there actually isn't a Kinko's in all of Acapulco where we live. So he actually had an amazing business. At first I thought it was kind of stupid, but that's, you know, the kids, like, they're so smart. And my daughter even came up with an idea. I used to smoke, and I was rolling my own cigarettes with this machine. And she came up and she's like, what if we put like cookies into here with the tobacco, and it'd be like cookie cigarettes. I'm like, I don't know if those will sell well, but you know, if you want to make them and try to sell them on the street. And she's all thinking about it. She's like, I wonder how much people would pay for them. I go, well, first of all, try it, make sure it works. But that's how my kids were already thinking at like 5, 6, 7. And that's really what it should be like, right? Like just entrepreneurial, trying stuff out instead of sit down, it's 8 o'clock, where were you? Now you're going to learn something you don't even care about for an hour. So let's go a little bit further into like what people should be doing or how they should be thinking about if they have kids in school, how to transition into that homeschooling environment.
Beautiful question. So number one, if you have your kids in school, which is understandable, maybe you're a single parent, maybe you're both working parents, even if you leave them in school, you can have a conversation with them about the school system. You can explain to them, hey, the bells, that's Pavlov programming, right? The class is changing up, that's not real, right? You can explain to them so they have a context when they're in class and they're just like angry and frustrated. They can be like, and they can even, you can get John Gatto's book, or you can take a look online and understand, I'm part of a social engineering process here. Like, and then once they can kind of remove themselves emotionally from the situation, understand, the schools get their money from attendance? That's interesting, right? And so they begin to understand how that process works. And also, one of the important things also, forget grades, okay? Grades matter zero. They only matter to people who think they matter. Same thing with high school diplomas and generally college degrees. I don't want to give a blanket statement, but the example is, when was the last time you asked somebody or hired somebody based on their GPA? Like, man, so what was your GPA in high school or college? Nobody cares. They would say, can you get the job done? I
have a side story just briefly. I used to have a company. I had over 250 employees, and I had one rule. I wouldn't hire anyone who had a college education. Because I'm like, what are they, morons? What, are they stupid? They wasted 4 years? What are they, idiots?
Right.
Anyway, keep going.
Yeah, I love it. So that's related to Thomas Edison, he's the one who invented the light bulb from electricity. And just so you know some context, during that time, all the experts were saying it's scientifically impossible to create electricity, to create light from electricity. All the scientific journals were saying this guy's a loony, crazy guy. And before he made the discovery, he was asked by a reporter. He said, Mr. Edison, everybody around you says you can't do it. It's scientifically impossible. And so, I just, want to know what makes you think you can do it? Like, why do you keep going? And Thomas Edison very confidently says, son, you just don't know how the world works. I haven't failed 10,000 times. I've successfully identified 10,000 ways which will not work, which means I'm 10,000 ways closer to finding the one way which will work. And that's what happened. So the reason I tell that story is because the philosophy of failure is just as important as philosophy of success. There is no failure. You fail when you quit, or you fail when you die, maybe one of them. But there is no failure, right? Some stranger who gives you a task and says, hey, go do this task that you don't want to do, and I'm going to evaluate it, especially writing assignments, man. Like, somebody tries to grade your writing assignment and you get a big letter on it, especially kids. You feel the emotional, like, I'm unworthy, I need permission, and these are just unrealities and basic lies. So we have to basically educate the parent on what is learning, And you can have, like I said, if your kid's in school, maybe work out a plan, maybe work out a 2-year plan or a 3-year plan to remove them. Or I haven't officially launched my school, but it's called Valor Academy, and I can accelerate your kid high school graduation and connect them with a mentor, an apprenticeship, some kind of internship, so they can leave the classroom and stop wasting their life and go do something that they want to do. So this is the other solution that I have, but it's a matter of reframing basically your entire philosophy of education and learning, and understand it's okay. There's no judgment here. We understand. Even myself, I went through the school system, 17 years of formal school, including college, and I see the habits that I've been indoctrinated with and some of the uncritical thinking that I do, and I'm like, wow, that's interesting. And again, love yourself, self-love, forgive yourself. And you mentioned the teachers too. My mother was a teacher for 20 years in the public school system. I have cousins that are principals and teachers now who I love dearly, all great people. But what happens is they were sold a bill of goods. They want to help kids. That's a noble career. You go and get the teacher's credentials, you join the school, you start making money, you get married, you have a wife and kids, and now you have a monthly financial requirement expense that you have to cover. So in order for you to leave this teaching career, it makes it more problematic. Like, you're going to change a career. So they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. And I've forgiven all those teachers in my school. I've forgiven the principal, kick me off the basketball team, these kind of things, because it's an inner game. And this is, I think, the big question of life,
Yeah, same thing with a lot of people who join the military. They think they're going to do something good. They very quickly usually find out they're not, and that's why 25 people in the military kill themselves every day now. So yeah, I don't. When I say most public school teachers are idiots, a lot of them are, but a lot of them didn't necessarily go into this for like evil reasons, but they got into an evil system. And the reason why it's evil is because it's centrally planned and not market-based. My kids go to a private school in Acapulco. Just last week, my driver didn't show up one day. We have a driver because it's only $12 a day, and he takes the kids to school every day. He didn't show up, so my wife said, "You're gonna have to take the kids to school today." I was like, I don't really feel like it. And you know what? I'd rather take them for a long walk and we'll just go talk and stuff, and we did. And they had the best day, we had the best day, and definitely no one from the school was calling like, "Where's your kids?" If anything, like if they ever come home and something upset them or something, it's like that teacher is going to get fired, right? Which is the opposite of what happens when you have a central planned system. So the whole system is just wrong. It's your typical central planned government-related thing. When it's privatized, at least, and then it's even more privatized when it's in your own home. And that's really the way it should be, right? The people, and this has been a whole thing. The whole system is to get families destroyed, right? And that's why you mentioned the mother and the father are working. That's through the central banking system, which has caused so much inflation that you need both parents working now. They want that. Then they want to get the kids into these kindergartens at like 2 or 3 years old now to start getting them indoctrinated. And it was Lenin who said, "Give me your child for 4 years, and the seed I plant will not be uprooted." Now they got them for 12 years and 16 years. This is all sort of planned. So people really need to realize they got to get outside of this system.
So you brought up a good point, and that is about the state and centralized planning. And so I want to bring up an important fact is how much money is involved in this business. Okay, so the largest union in the country is what union? The Teachers Association, the National Education Association, NEA is what it's called, over 3 million members. So what are they about? They're about, it's a public union, my gosh. They mandate you to attend, mandate you pay for it through property taxes, and then they have all this political power as well. So whenever you hear something for the kids from these politicians, take it with a grain of salt or just dismiss it entirely. They're trying to indoctrinate your kids with their beliefs. Okay, so this is an organization funded by stolen tax money, right, that's what tax is. And then if you think about the number of people who are involved with the system, they're all dependent on their livelihood, their income. So they have this kind of political power with how many members are involved, and then they got teachers by their genitals as well, saying, do what we say or we're gonna, dismiss you. And if you think about the school as an organization, just like any organization, they're interested in their financial interest, and their interest primarily, and in a free market, you would get, customers, and you want to have clients, long-term relationships, create harmonious situations, outcomes, benefiting both people. In the school, because they have a full monopoly that's funded with, mandatory taxes, they can do anything they want. And if you imagine it was, say, run by McDonald's, let's say McDonald's was in charge of the school system, you would see pictures of Ray Kroc, the founder, on the wall, and you would pledge allegiance to the McDonald's flag in the morning, and you would learn about the nutritional value of all these meals. And when you graduated their school, you'd be qualified to become a worker at their organization, right? Because always recruiting and building, developing talent. So you can put any corporation in charge of that, and you can see, you just, instead of putting the presidents up there, you put the founders or whoever you want them to glorify and worship, and that's what it is. They put the presidents on the walls and make you feel inferior. They say, and hey, I like George Washington, other than his, of course, slavery back that is different timing, but he was a courageous man, to not take the kingship and to fight the British soldiers, and some of the history behind that. He's got just a great story. But so there are some good people, but a lot of them didn't hold up their oath to the Constitution, like Abraham Lincoln, unfortunately. He's, deified and said he's great. Well, he led to many hundreds of thousands of deaths in the Civil War. So that's a tangent there. But the point is there's a lot of money involved, special interests. They like it the way it is. So I have no hope in political reform. I have no hope in, although Betsy DeVos, I think she has good intentions, and I think she might be an underground revolutionary trying to do charter schools with vouchers, allow a little bit more choice. And just for some reference, the voucher program, which would allow parents, instead of going to your neighborhood school, you would get a voucher, this coupon, and you could take it to any school, and so you could take that $10,000 or $12,000, $15,000, however much it's worth in your particular state. Choice is the answer, and monopolies ruin these kids' minds, and they like it the way it is. So in California alone, $70 billion is their annual budget, and you got 6 million kids in the school system there, and I don't know off the top of my head what it is nationwide, but a great mentor of mine said, big money makes people act funny. So you start bringing these big paychecks, these big outcomes, and they're gonna do anything they want, especially these politicians. And now you got forced vaccination in California, SB277. You cannot go to public school unless you vaccinate your kids. And now they got something to pipeline, I don't know if it passed or not, called SB18, where they want to redefine a children's Bill of Rights. The adult Bill of Rights isn't good enough. They got to make the kids' Bill of Rights, and what it is, in my view, it's a scheme for the state to redefine what parents are allowed to do, and they have a quality education, appropriate health care, all this vague language, and so they can basically take your kids if you don't comply. And I'll wrap up this part with saying, the state uses fear to control you. Do not be fearful. There's a great video by Larkin Rose called The Tiny Dot. Ladies and gentlemen, we outnumber the state controllers by millions. It's unbelievable, the number. So be encouraged, be brave, and take a risk. Try something new. Check out Gatto's book. Check out some of the stuff that we have going on. But so that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah, Joe B. Weeks has been on our show, Anarchast. He's actually flying here right now. I don't know if you knew that. He was at PorcFest. He decided to come here for whatever reason. That's Joby. He loves to fly. But his wife, Stephanie Weeks, put a great post on Facebook a few weeks ago saying the best educational experience or the best stories in life are found between the pages of a passport. And we obviously don't like passports. We don't think we should need as human beings a approval from some government to travel around, but travel really is one of the best educations. And you know, most of the things that are really the best educations are never taught in schools. So this idea that, and people really, and they've really been brainwashed about this idea. They're just told, look at, you know, Mr. T, I remember back in the 80s, don't be a fool, stay in school. Like, what? Oh, like what an idiot. Like, don't be a fool, get out of school is really what it is. Just like everything that we're told, everything we're taught, everything we're indoctrinated with is the opposite. And really people should be trying to get out of those schools. And you know, for me personally, and you brought it up earlier, there's not one day I don't learn something. I'm constantly learning. I spend as much stuff as I do, I probably spend just as much time just learning. I'm watching YouTube videos, I'm reading articles, reading books, just constantly learning. And that's what life is really all about. It's not about 12 years of a government school. There's so many more options, and I guess that was why you probably called it Education Options, your conference, because there really is, and people just aren't tapping into those options. So maybe there's some other ways you want to tell people that there are options out there and what they're doing.
Absolutely. So one of the most mind-blowing movies I've seen is called Summerhill. You look it up on YouTube for free. Summerhill 2008 is what it is. It's based on a true story, and the school still exists. It's been around for 90 years. It's called democratic schooling. And the reason I recommend that is because in this school, kids are not compelled to do anything. It's a K-12 school in the UK, and they come to school, they give you a list of classes. They say, hey, Jeff, here's what we have to offer. Go ahead and check off what you want to learn. If you don't want to learn anything, we got 5 acres in the back. We got a tree house over there. We got a bike ramp over there. There's music instruments in the barn over there. Thanks for coming to Summerhill. And so I watched this movie. I took a course called How to Start a School, and that was one thing, okay, Summerhill. The other one's called Agile Learning Centers, and they're opening up schools all around the country as well. It's based on the Agile software philosophy, because what happens in software is that there's so many new discoveries being made and creations of knowledge and inventions. So if they do a 24-month project, 6 months in, there can be a new discovery that just changes everything. So they're always readjusting. It's really cool. There's a speech about that if you type into to YouTube. And then North Star Learning out of Massachusetts also has been around for 20 years, and this is about self-directed teen centers. So imagine a school, imagine a building where there's adults who care for you. They don't want to force you to do anything. You go when you want to, you leave when you want to. This is North Star, and they started something called a Liberated Learners Network, helping other people start schools. And if you're a wealthy person, you can donate to them, or you want to start a local school. Naturally, they need help generating revenue and working out their financial models. This is the one of the challenges, because like I said, schools have a monopoly. They don't got to worry about rent. But when you're an entrepreneur and doing it bootstrapping, that's one of your main concerns, is how to keep a roof over your head. So those are some of the other options. And I mentioned homeschool, and there's something called Praxis as well. They got some good programs for apprenticeship, generally for maybe later teens or college age. But there's a lot of options, and stay plugged in with that channel, because I'll be uploading more interviews and stuff that I'm interviewing with people and helping them realize, like, learning is everywhere. And so my philosophy of my school of Valor Academy is that the world's the classroom, and anything you can learn from is your teacher, or anybody you can learn from, both can be your teacher. And so when you have that kind of framework, then you're always learning. And like you said, then you start to love learning. You start to really enjoy, like, this is exciting. And because of technology, the fact that we can even have this conversation on video, you have your own TV channel, goes worldwide. You can start your own podcast, which is an international radio show, or blogging, international newspaper for free, basically. And this has never been done in history. So the platform is there. And I just encourage you to find your passion, whether you're the student or the parent, and that I'll parlay that in. The kid is watching you, mom and dad, uncle, auntie. They're watching. They're like, okay, how do they do it? And kids learn what they live, and an example is the best way that they can learn. So if you want your kid to go out and do something successful, then do it yourself. Or you want your kid to go out and start a learning project that they're passionate about, then you can go do that same thing, and they'll say, that's how mom does it. That's how dad does it. That's how grandpa does it. And then whether they're 5 or 8 or 10, that goes in their subconscious mind. And by the time they're 16, 18, 20, they start to be strong and say, this is my life, this is me, I can do it. And that belief system can take them a long ways.
Yeah, I was at a conference once, and a woman came up, and she was pretty distraught. And she was like, I've heard what you said about education before. And my son, he's like 14 or 15, and he hates school. He keeps getting in trouble because he won't listen to the teachers. And I just don't know what to do. And I said, well, it sounds like he's got tons of potential because he's not bowing down to illegitimate authority. He's saying, who are you to tell me what to do? Why should I learn this physics? I don't care about physics. I care about computers, or I care about basketball, or whatever it is, or art, or whatever it is. I don't care about physics. Why are you telling me what to do? So I told her what I tell most people: just get him out of school. And that's why we brought up, and that's why we're doing this podcast. A lot of it is to tell people some of the ways they can do that. And then I heard back from her like a year later, and she was like, oh, he's so much happier. He's started his own business. He's like 15 or something. He's perfect now. Everything's perfect. So there's just options out there. And so, some people seem to like school for whatever reason. Even my daughter, because I tell my kids all the time, whenever they come home from school, sometimes I go, you don't have to go there. And my son's like, yeah, I think I'll stay for a little bit longer. There's some things I want to do, but I totally don't. I think a year or two from now, I'm not going to go anymore. I'm like, good. Who cares? And my daughter's like, no, I have to go, Papa. And we actually had this conversation. And she's like, I need to go to those places to learn. She goes, I'm not like you. I know that you can learn on your own, but I can't. And I'm like, okay, well, if you want to go, that's fine, right? If you want to go, that's an option. But a lot of people don't. And as we pointed out during this whole podcast, it's just so bad of an education, and you're really not learning anything. And just look at all those stats of people coming out of high school in the US. Half of them can't even read. What were they doing the whole time? And people are like, these kids around here, they're always keying my car and putting dog poop on my stairs. It's like, yeah, because they're living in prison. They spend 8 hours a day in prison. They get out, they're not allowed to drink, they're not allowed to smoke. Not that those are good things, but just the fact that they're not allowed to do it is not good. They can't go to anywhere. They can't go to a nightclub if they want. They can't go to an X-rated or R-rated movie or whatever they want to do. They can't do anything, really. They're basically like the most, subjugated or enslaved people are kids today. And people can't figure out why the kids are having all these problems and why they're causing all these problems. It's obvious. It's the whole system is wrong.
Absolutely. And one of the things they learn in that system is bullying. Right, just like in real prisons, right, there becomes a hierarchy because they realize there's people with guns and they're pointing at them, so they got to figure out their power structure. Well, kids, there's not guns pointed at them, but there's fear, shame, embarrassment, and these might as well be guns, especially when you're a 10-year-old kid or 12 years old, who you want your social peers to approve you. And so they learn bullying. They say that bullying and anger and hate is a result of frustration, right? Inner frustration, because they're forced to be here, they don't want to be here, and if they realize their personal power, they would just get up and leave, because that's their own right. The state is an immoral institution, it's illegitimate, and this school is the way that it perpetuates itself. And this is why I think they're going to try to cramp down on homeschooling nationwide, is because it is so revolutionary, and the state's trying to control and all these things. Because if you lose the mind of the kid, you lose them, you know. And this is what Winston Churchill said 50 years ago: the empires of the future are the empires of the mind. And so this is my best recommendation. Get your kids out if you can, and if you can't, work away or co-op something, or explain to them what's going on so they realize they're not wrong, they're not stupid, they're actually in a bad system. So free them if you can, if not, have a conversation with them.
And another thing I would add to that is I live in Mexico. I hear all these horror stories about people, they're not allowed to take their kids out of some schools in some states. Some states I don't think you can even homeschool legally, or if you do, it's like super hard to do, all these kind of rules. Private schools, of course, in the US, you're talking tens and tens of thousands of dollars a year, so that's out of the range of most people. But as I said, in Mexico, no one cares what we do with our kids, which is great. The government doesn't force us to do anything. There's no vaccinations that I know of. My kids haven't been vaccinated. Private school is very cheap if we want to go to private school. And that's just Mexico. There's so many other countries out there. So if you are finding it's too hard in the US or you can't afford it, and what did I point out? One of the best educations is travel. So you got a 10-year-old kid, you go on a round the world trip, you go to live in Thailand for a while, that's gonna be one of the best educations ever. Do a little homeschooling on the side, that kind of stuff. And you know, with technology today, everything can be done over the internet. You don't have to stay in one place to do all this stuff.
Absolutely.
So we should actually probably leave it at that. We keep running out of sunlight here. That was great. And I've been sitting in the sun for 2 hours. I just did an interview before this. So we should wrap up a little fairly quickly. You brought up people should watch your channel for more information, but you didn't tell us what channel, so why don't you let us know on that. Anything else you want to let people know so they can follow you, especially when you start doing more of your homeschooling stuff? Yeah,
I'll share we just released the volume 1 of the Underground History by Taylor Gatto. It's going to be a 3-volume set, and we intend to make a film out of it in the coming years, so stay tuned with that. Actually, G. Edward Griffin and Dana Martin have done the forward and afterward on the 2nd volume, so we're excited about that. The channel, which I've been building the last couple of years, putting speeches up there, it's called Education Options TV. That's on the web. I just started a new one called Homeschool Leader, which I'll start putting some of the trainings on there. And then John Taylor Gatto TV is a great channel as well. You can see some of his philosophies, and the reason he has 30 years experience, so he has super credibility, he won all these awards, and he's the most credible voice that I know who has come out and said this is a damaging system, and he put it on his book. It's a prison, folks. And so he's actually the one, I don't know if you saw that, there's a skull and bones on there, and it was kind of like poison, right, like this. And he's the one who recommended put 322 on there for skull and bones. So this guy's a really strong man. So that's what I would encourage you to do. Check out those things on YouTube, homeschoolleader.com. The website's almost finished. Put your email in there if you want to stay connected when I launch this. And then valor-academy.com if you want an accelerated school program to connect with apprenticeships, mentorships, things like this. And those things will be up shortly. So stay tuned and keep watching Anarchast.
Yeah, we'll have all the links to that all down below. And come check out Anarchapulco if you got kids. We had a lot of people bring their kids this year. We had Dana Martin doing a full 3-day family camp, unschooling sort of a thing, teaching people how to do stuff like that. And I've met so many unschooled and homeschooled kids from anarchist families, and they are some of the most amazing people I've ever met in my life. And you meet a lot of public school kids, and they just walk in and they're like, what? Right? Because they're just, they've been beat up at school all day. They just don't even want to be there. I meet these unschooled and homeschooled kids. They come in, their eyes are just glowing, and they come in, they're like, what are we going to do today? And they're all, like you said, they're all brilliant in their own way. They're all genius in their own way. They're all different in their own way. And they haven't been trained to all be alike. That's a big part of the schooling system as well, right? Everyone's got to be sort of all the same. Go to school with all the same age people, which is also very damaging, right? Because if they're not around adults, especially when they're going through puberty, we should probably have you back on to talk more about this, because we could talk for hours about how wrong the system is. So I will have you back on. Maybe we'll figure out a time. I don't know if it could be Freedom Fest or whatever, but we'll have you back on in the next few months, because this is a topic I think it's so important, because children are the future. I know it sounds so cliche, but it actually is the case. And when I see these unschooled anarchists and homeschooled anarchist kids, I just imagine, what if the whole world was like that? It would be amazing. And what no government could ever hold those kids down. They'd get to whatever age the government says they're an adult, and the government come and say, hey, you owe us some taxes, and they'd be like, what? Who's that guy? Weird. That was weird. And they just walk off. They wouldn't be like, oh, I'm sorry, sir. Oh, yes. They're not being trained to be obedient and stuff like that. So yeah, this is actually the future. So definitely check out all his stuff. We'll have the links all down below. And like I said, Anarchapulco, we actually haven't announced the dates officially, but I believe it's going to be February 15th to 18th, 2017. I'm pretty sure you'll be there. You're there every year as far as I know. And we'll have a lot of stuff related to this. Like I said, Dana Martin's Unschooling, Peaceful Parenting, Family Camp, and things like that. And yeah, please like, subscribe, share this video. Let people know. People don't know about these options. There's so many options and people don't know. And so many of them are so much better. And we can have such a better world. And the kids, you just see the night and day difference when they're allowed to do what they want to do. And they want to learn. They're just full of energy. They want to learn. But the government indoctrination camps will just take that out of them. So get them out of there as soon as possible. And that's it for Anarchast. Your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.
From Acapulco, Mexico, this is Anarchast.